Let's talk about circles. So think what a circle means. It's all the points in the plane that are some fixed distance away from one point in the plane that we call the center. Let's say the center is at this point x naught, y naught. And that distance is what we call the radius. So to belong to the circle, your distance from x naught, y naught has to be r. So what does the distance formula say? Well, that would say that for xy to belong to the circle, the distance from xy to x naught, y naught would have to be r. Right? That's literally the distance from the point x naught, y naught, the center of the circle, to the point xy equals r. This equation is a lot simpler if I square both sides. That would get rid of the radical. So for instance, let's suppose somebody said, find the equation of a circle, let's say, that goes through the point 1, 1 and is centered at 0, -7. See, if somebody gave me the center and the radius of the circle, I could write down the circle. So there's some homework problems generally where they give you that information but in kind of an indirect way. Well, not too indirectly, because they told me the center of the circle this time. So there's x naught, y naught, 0, -7. And 1, 1 is just one point on the curve. So all I need to do is find out what r is, and then I can write down the equation of the circle. In fact, I could really find just r squared. I don't really need to find r. R squared would be satisfactory. Let's see, so what is r squared? Well, picture that to be 1, 1, and this to be 0, -7. R squared must be 1 minus 0 squared plus 1 minus a -7 squared. R squared must be 1 plus 8 squared is 64. It must be 65. So the equation of the circle is x minus 0 squared plus y minus a -7 squared equals 65. I feel kind of silly writing it like that, so I'm going to simplify it as x squared plus y plus 7 squared is 65. How about this one? Find the center and radius of this circle. I'll give you a two-parter. How about this one? X minus 1 squared equals 7 minus y plus 4 squared. Well, I can read off the center and the radius if I just make the equation look like this. This isn't too far removed from that. Let's just add this y plus 4 squared term to both sides. So the equation would be x minus 1 squared plus y plus 4 squared is 7. So what's the center? The center is the point whose x and y coordinates I see being subtracted from x and y here in this equation. The center is 1, -4. And that's r squared. So what's r? Well, r is a distance. So even though there are two numbers whose square is 7, I'm not interested in the negative one. R has got to be the positive square root of 7. That's exactly what that symbol means. The radical 7 means the positive root of 7. Here's the second part. Find the center and radius of that thing. Man, that doesn't even look like the equation of a circle. Well, I'll give you a clue. What somebody did is they started off with a nice equation that looked like that. You know, x minus something squared plus y minus or plus something squared equals a number. And if you fold all that stuff out, you could collect up some terms. There'd be an x squared and an x term here and a constant. There'd be a y squared term and a y to the 1 term and some constant. The constant here would be 16. and there's a constant there. You could gather all the constants together, and then it would look something like that. That's what somebody did. They started off with a nice, reasonable equation of a circle that would allow me to read off the center and radius, and they kind of mucked it up by squaring all that stuff out and collecting up terms. My job is to unmuck it, to get it back to this form. But how? How do I turn that into that? That's what completing the square is good for. See, the first two terms came from this square. So let's ask ourselves, I'm going to put some room here. What would, if there were three terms here that were a perfect square, what must the next term be? Well, the rule is, as long as there's a 1 in front of the x squared, you take half of that number and square it. For this to be a perfect, for these three guys to form a perfect square, this would have to be 9. I would like to add 9 there. I can just add a 9 there, though. I could add 9 to both sides. That's legitimate. So that's what I'll do. What's the missing term here? If these three were a perfect square, completing the square says you take half of that and square it. So half of that is 2, squared is plus 4. So add a 4 there. Better add a 4 there as well. Now these three guys make a perfect square. Factor them. Well, you could go through backwards FOIL if you like, but when you took half of that number and squared it to get 9, you got -3. You already found what that number is. That's the square. These three guys are the square of x minus 3. And these three guys, they're the square of y plus 2. So this is 11 and 4 is 15. Now I can see what the center is. The center is the point whose x and y coordinates are being subtracted from x and y in this equation. That's 3, -2. That's r squared. So the radius must be the square root of 15.